Young adult fiction, or YA fiction, has been massively popular for decades at this point. However, YA fiction also isn't typically taken very seriously by the wider bookish world. And I understand why. Those of us who aren't young adults are not the target market of YA fiction. But even so, there is a kind of snobbery about this, and anyone listening to this now who is an adult who enjoys YA fiction is gonna know what I'm talking about. A lot of adult readers would not pass up the opportunity to look down their nose at a fellow adult reading a YA novel. And I think this is massively misguided, and maybe I'm talking in a vacuum here because I used to be one of those people, an adult who would just look down their nose at another grown-up person reading a YA novel, and I would think, why aren't you reading something for adults? And over the past few years, I have hugely changed my tune on this, and I continue to do so, because what has struck me recently as something so admirable about young adult fiction is the way in which it tackles serious themes, political and social themes, and that's what I want to talk about here. I personally am a reader for whom themes are very important. I like my fiction, whatever genre it's in, to tackle big topics about things like class inequality, immigration, race, feminism, queer rights, etc., etc. I like my books to be about something. And a curiosity that I've noticed personally is that so many of the YA books that I've been enjoying tackle those themes in a very mature, very thought-provoking way that I had naively overlooked, especially as someone who has read and even taught The Hunger Games back when I was a teacher. Looking back on The Hunger Games, it's amazing how those books approach the politics that they explore, especially the third book. If you go back and read The Hunger Games now, you'll be probably reasonably impressed by this book's approach to dystopia, to authoritarianism, to class divides, to workers' rights, to revolution, etc., etc. But what I find so moving and impressive about the third book in the trilogy, although now there's 5 books, is the way in which that book handles the topic of propaganda. And not just in the way that you might expect, teaching us that propaganda is bad, how to spot propaganda, how to know when tabloid newspapers are committing propagandist angles. That was a weird sentence. You get what I mean? The Hunger Games books are even smarter than that. In the third book, we aren't just presented with the angle that propaganda is dangerous and manipulative, but we also see how propaganda can be used in a positive way, but that use of positive is a bit narrow as well. What I'm saying is the good guys, the people that we root for, the revolutionaries in that book, utilize propaganda in really interesting ways in order to garner support and build their revolution. And when I say using propaganda in a positive way, that in itself is kind of murky because propaganda is inherently manipulative, and yet they utilize it. And that, as a moral question mark, is explored in these books. This is very complex stuff. I could make a whole video about propaganda and the moral and philosophical implications of using propaganda, and all of that is explored in The Hunger Games, books for teenagers. And so when people choose to not take YA fiction seriously, they are massively underestimating the moral and ethical and political and philosophical ideas that get explored in young adult fiction like The Hunger Games. And so for that reason, I have really come around on the power of YA fiction, and I am so glad that it exists. I am so proud of and impressed by so many YA authors who are willing to tackle these themes and address teenagers as they do so, making sure that teenagers are aware of these things, aware of propaganda and its power from multiple different angles as well. And on the subject of complex political themes being explored in young adult fiction, we have the works of Andrew Joseph White. Andrew Joseph White is a horror author. He's also a trans man. He's also autistic. He's also a working class writer, and he weaves so much of that into his fiction, exploring all of these things in hypnotically complex but also very digestible ways. Right now, as I make this video, I am reading his debut adult adult novel, and it's called You Weren't Meant to Be Human, and it is grotesquely upsetting. I would need 1,000 trigger warnings to talk about that book, and I'm not even done with it yet. But before writing that book, Andrew Joseph White made a huge name for himself with 3 young adult horror novels, this being, in my personal opinion, the best one, Compound Fracture. His first book was a work of post-apocalyptic fiction, Hell Followed With Us, which I thought was fine. Then he really impressed me with this work of historical, supernatural, feminist fiction, The Spirit Bares Its Teeth. But it's Compound Fracture that really demonstrates the potential political power of young adult fiction on young readers, and the importance of reading this stuff. Compound Fracture has a transgender protagonist who's also autistic, and the book explores being a young trans man who's also autistic in a small working class rural community. But it's the exploration of class dynamics, the exploration of left-wing politics in a conservative town, a town of working class people who have bought into conservative values, as so often happens in so many rural places across the US, the UK, etc. It's so fucking clever. I have made multiple videos where I have referenced the intelligence of this novel for readers of any age. The way that this book explores generational trauma, generational struggles, class consciousness, class betrayal, police brutality, and so many other things besides. It is so intelligent. It is so captivating. And it does all of that through the perspective of a young autistic trans guy who is haunted by the ghost of his socialist great-grandfather who was executed for being a unionist. There is so much going on here. This is a really incredible book. I genuinely think about this book like once a day. It has stayed with me in such a massively impactful way, and I encourage everybody to read it, regardless of their age, as long as they're a young adult or above, not children. You get what I mean. And again, continuing with the topic of politics, I recently read this, A Language of Dragons, a brand new debut novel. This is a young adult work of historical fantasy fiction, set in an alternate version of 1920s England. An England in which dragons are real and always have been. And it explores how the existence of dragons and the relationship between humankind and dragonkind has changed the history, the culture, the politics, the religion, etc. of European human existence. But it's also, again, like The Hunger Games, a book about revolution, a book about class divides. In this book, World War I still happened, but the class divide in this novel is something a lot more opaque. The lines between classes are a lot more rigid. You are born into one of 3 classes, and when you're a teenager, you take a test where the outcome of the test is that you stay in your class or maybe move up or down depending on what class you're currently in. Our protagonist is a gifted linguist who dreams of going to university to study dragon languages, of which she already speaks multiple. And when her second-class family invite an academic professor around to their home to discuss dragon dialects, this professor reveals that she's actually there to have our protagonist's parents arrested for dissent. They are alleged to have been part of a rebel group that is rising up against this flimsy peace agreement between humankind and dragonkind. There's a lot more to go into, and I'm not going to, but I had such a blast reading this book, because as the blurb says, our protagonist goes from being a very confused teenager with aspirations of academia to a revolutionary overnight, because she snaps into life. She realizes what's going on. The scales fall from her eyes, the dragon scales fall from her eyes. She sees society for what it is, and she hits the ground running, doing what she thinks is right to free her family. And over time, she realizes the corruption within the system of her country. It's absolutely brilliant. And like The Hunger Games, it really gets you thinking about oppression and about class imbalance, about authoritarianism in all of its forms. It's incredible stuff. And again, This is a young adult novel. But it's not just YA fiction's approach to politics and the complexities of politics that impresses me. I recently finished reading Divine Rivals. This YA novel by Rebecca Ross is a romantic fantasy novel. Although it's pretty light on the fantasy, it's more like a loosely imagined version of World War I Europe, with some gods and magic thrown in for flavor, but it doesn't go that deep. But what I was so impressed with, and honestly relieved by when it comes to this book, is the fact that it actually treats romance like romance. I have been very outspoken in the past, and I will continue to be outspoken about the issues surrounding romantasy, and the fact that so many of the most popular romantasy books are not romances. They are toxic abuse stories that romanticize patriarchy and the abuse of women by men. There is nothing romantic in so many romantasy books. Divine Rivals is a romance. Like, it's actually romantic. And I was really relieved by that. I was touched by it. I was moved by it. I am a romantic. I love love. I love romance. I enjoy when epic fantasy novels have romantic subplots. I yearn for romance. And so as someone who actually appreciates romance, as in actual romance, I have been repeatedly disappointed by all of the most toxic ones. The worst offender obviously being Alchemized, a truly horrendous and evil book that I've talked about a lot at this point. And I'll continue to rave about that book forever. This is like an antidote to that kind of toxic romantasy. Divine Rivals is a gorgeous, gorgeous little thing. It presents us with a kind of enemies to lovers story. A young protagonist whose brother goes off to war to fight for one god against another god, and you learn more about the lore of these gods as the book goes on. It's very good at sort of drip feeding this lore, this history, this mythology, rather than dumping exposition in your lap. You learn about it as and when you need to. But while her brother is off fighting, whether or not she agrees with it is a different story, she follows her dream of becoming a journalist. And that's a really fun twist on the fantasy formula, to have a protagonist who's a journalist. She's reporting on the developments of this war and what's going on back home. And of course, she is competing with the hot young guy in the office for the new position of columnist. She's only 18, he's 19, and they both dream of becoming the columnist. It's a big opportunity, and they're both trying their best to impress the editor. When they are in the office together, they hate each other, and they have really kind of fun, flirtatious, but angry banter, and it is genuinely charming. It's the kind of thing that could grate on you, and it just doesn't at all. It's moving, it's sweet, it's often funny, and I really love the way that these two people love to hate each other. But the magic first rears its head when our protagonist Iris is writing letters to her brother, and after giving up hope that the letters will actually reach him, she starts writing them more as a diary for herself, just to fulfill that urge to talk to him when she can't. And she puts these letters in little envelopes and slides them under her closet door, only to find that they then vanish. And a little while later, sliding out from underneath her closet door are letters from someone else. Her closet door is somehow a portal to somebody else who is receiving her letters and writing back to her. And of course, it's her love interest. We know that, he knows that, but she doesn't. Now that doesn't seem very fair, but the way that it plays out actually is pretty sweet. It's kind of interesting. You end up not holding it against him, not treating it as this toxic abuse of power or abuse of knowledge. Rebecca Ross manages to not frame it that way, and that is really refreshing and impressive. Why this happens? Well, it's not too important, and it does get revealed how the magic works, and it works. It holds up. You kind of go, okay, that's fun. These two people have some sort of historic connection that gets revealed over time, and I really liked it. And the romance builds and builds, and eventually they both end up at the front lines, reporting on the war as journalists in the trenches. I won't tell you anymore, but my God, this is such a charming, lovely, heartstring-pulling, actually romantic novel. Like a genuine, actual, real romance that just had me feeling so happy, crying tears of happiness and sadness. It's a genuinely great romance. And I'm now thinking, right, does that mean I have to turn to YA fiction to get actually good romance? If so, great. Happy to do it. I've already got the sequel. And just to finish off, I have already done a video about this book, but it was quite a while ago now. This is Felix Ever After by Case and Callender. I'm really not gonna belabor my point here, but my God, what a wonderful work of queer romance fiction. It's actually quite similar to Divine Rivals. It also involves two people sending messages to each other anonymously, not knowing who the other is, and it's actually weirdly similar. But this came out first, and it is political in the sense that it explores the social struggles of young queer people, non-binary and trans people, complexity when it comes to human emotion, human connection, human attraction. All of it is tackled with so much grace and nuance, and yet so much digestibility. Nothing is overly complex in the way that it's presented, but these themes are still complex in and of themselves. I think that's one of the impressive, really impressive things about so many young adult authors, is they take topics that are complicated and nuanced and detailed and present them in a way that is so understandable, so easy to wrap your mind around and digest. But then it's up to you to sit with these things and really allow them to blossom in your mind, in your heart. These authors do this so brilliantly. It's a real talent of YA authors to take complex topics, political topics, social topics, and turn them into something that can be so easily understood and connected with. I am consistently impressed by all of these authors, and I now have found myself with so much love and respect for YA fiction and what it does in its presentation of human emotion, human connection, relationships, characters, and most of all, big political themes and ideas. Which is why on my TBR, I have more young adult fiction to tuck into soon. This one is also supposed to be wonderfully political, and I'm really excited about that. My friend who works for the publisher and sent me this copy said that this is like Fourth Wing, but without the toxicity and with some much more complex political themes being explored. Great. And this is some sort of feminist Jack Sparrow pirate story. And, well, my first tattoo was a Jack Sparrow tattoo because Pirates of the Caribbean is one of my favorite films. So I'm very excited for both of these. I can't show you the tattoo, by the way, it's on my tip, but I'm gonna get it covered up by a big raven at some point. Hopefully some point soon. I keep putting that one off because it's gonna hurt so bad and it'll cost a lot of money. Anyway, I love young adult fiction, and I really, really hope that through these little mini reviews, this exploration of different young adult novels, I have helped to convince anyone who doesn't typically explore young adult fiction to understand the power, the nuance, the benefits, and the sheer importance of young adult fiction. It's so good. It's so great. If you've enjoyed this, you can read my book. This is Managing and Other Lies. You can click the link in the description and go check out a copy, buy a copy, support me. Managing and Other Lies is a collection of dark and twisted queer horror stories. I'm very proud of them, and I've got more things in the works. I'm writing new stuff. I'm posting that on my Patreon. You can support me on Patreon from $1 a month, $3, $5, whatever you can afford. I would really, really appreciate your support. If you've enjoyed this video and you want to show me your support, then give me some money on Patreon and or buy my book. Thank you, and subscribe for books.